Absolutely, born and raised.
Cool. I am not a native, but I have lived here for the last 10 years. I am 19 years old. I'm currently doing online University to Mexico in-state. Today on the podcast, we're going to be talking about the issue of teen suicide. I'd like to go over a couple statistics here. First, suicide is the second leading cause of death for college-aged youths, ages 12 through 18. More teenagers and young adults die from suicide than cancer, heart disease, AIDS, birth defects, stroke, pneumonia, influenza, and chronic lung disease all combined. Each day in our nation, there are over 3,700 attempts by young people grades 9 through 12. And 4 out of 5 teens attempt suicide have given clear warning signs in the past. These statistics are provided by the Jason Foundation. Now that you've heard that, Amber, how do those numbers make you feel?
I mean, obviously they're very unsettling, and to know that suicide is one of the most leading causes to death, right next to car crashes, because, that's when teens start to drive.
Yeah.
It's not very safe.
No.
It is very unsettling to hear and very sad.
So I wanted to ask you today about your personal experience as you went through high school. How did the issue of teen suicide play out in front of you? How did it impact your community, and what were a few of the common denominators you noticed as you went through 4 years of high school?
Well, I moved to a new area, so obviously that was hard for me. And I also had suffered from depression, so I feel for the people who have attempted or have, actually committed, which is very sad to say, but also it happens more often than you would think. Not only the attempts, but people thinking it, because that's not actually a statistic, because no one would actually admit that.
No.
But
it's kind of like a silent issue.
It really is. It really is, because people don't actually want to speak out and say how they truly feel, because it might scare people.
Yeah, it's a hard topic. To be vulnerable is hard, and from what I've seen, a lot of times that plays out as just denial of the problem. It's a hard topic to talk about anyways, depression, especially if it's about yourself. So that makes sense that not a lot of people talk about it. But how did you perceive depression in high school, and were there any common causalities between your experiences from what you saw?
Dealing with it's obviously hard. It's going to be hard. Reaching out is hard, but seeing it, I did know some people that had attempt, and they did eventually reach out and get help, but it's harder to answer that question in the sense of, since people don't talk about it, you don't really know what's going on. But obviously there are a bunch of warning signs that you can see in class. The classic hood up, sleeping in class, not talking to anyone, just listening to their music.
Yeah. From my experience, I've noticed a lot of that as well. A lot of times it's the people that are quiet, but just as often I've noticed is the people that are completely opposite of that, which makes it even harder to discern between people at risk and not, because it could easily span across multiple different types of personalities.
I completely agree with that, because, for some people, going to school is kind of a getaway from being at home and being alone at home versus, if their parents work all the time, because the area that we live in and that we went to high school in, everyone was constantly working, so there wasn't a lot of parental guidance at home.
Yeah. How, if you were to say definitively, could you describe a few causes of what you think push the suicide epidemic that's going on in our country?
One of the causes is definitely parents being unaware of their kids' mental health, or just being unaware of mental health in general and not being educated on the subject. I've seen that a lot. I've seen a lot with our friends and growing up with them. And also, people should understand that depression can be developed, but it also could just be the chemical imbalance in your brain that you're born with, and kids might not actually know, what is going on with them or why they feel the way they feel.
All right. That is very true, and it sounds familiar to what I have experienced. A big thing that I've noticed as I went to two separate high schools was a big thing that's just the subject isn't addressed. It's happening every year I went through high school. There were more and more suicides. It went from one kid in my class to two kids in my class to 3 to 5. And the trend has continued throughout this nation from what I've seen. A big thing I've noticed is a feeling of isolation. Kids don't feel available to talk about negative things because big time is they're really pressured to succeed and not be weak, and depression is seen as a weakness by a lot of people in our generation.
I definitely agree with that. And also, high school is when you're studying really hard and trying to get into that college, and all that pressure that's put on one single child to go to college and to get into a good college and have a good life, that puts so much stress on a kid that it can drive them to want to do that.
Yeah, I agree. Two of my friends in high school were very success oriented and a lot of pressure from their parents, and they attempted, both of them, and thank God both of them survived. In talking to them after, what I found out was the only conversation being had was about success. And when these kids started to feel like failures and unsuccessful due to the fact that they are depressed and they're having these issues with mental health, the contrast is pretty stark as to what is expected and to what is the reality. So the conversation was never had because honestly they were afraid to talk about how they're struggling when they're so expected to succeed. That was a big common theme that I've noticed as an athlete and as a studious person. It crosses whatever field you are specific in, whether it be an athlete or a scholar or a musician.
I definitely completely agree with that. And also, another thing to look on is, people might actually reach out to their parents and they just don't believe them. They're just like, oh, you're just sad. You're just stressed. There's nothing actually wrong with you. Or they might not just believe that mental health is a real issue.
Yeah, absolutely. How have you seen the local schools address this issue?
Honestly, I took psychology in high school, which was very useful, and I think that everyone should take it because it's just better to understand and learn these things. But in general, we learned about it maybe once when we were doing health our freshman year. And that's kind of the only time it's really talked about in high school.
Which is completely besides the point because I'm assuming no one really remembered that class.
Especially being took your freshman year of high school when you don't even know what's going on in
Very
general.
overwhelmed, and the first thing they say is due to stress, depression arises, and then everyone forgets that lesson and they never reorient that lesson. It's inefficient in conveying the message and information that these kids need.
I also would do my own research, and talking about mental health, I feel, is more important now than ever, especially, but also it's being talked about a lot more, I feel like. Or at least I feel like it's being talked about a lot more because I'm reaching out to learn more.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like a lot of people that have close experience with the issue tend to be more educated. But I feel like those people aren't the ones that are at risk the most. People that have the experience but don't have the research and the knowledge tend to actually go down that route and follow through with it, which is really sad. If you could say the biggest impact this has had on your community at the local level, how would you describe it?
I feel like it hasn't been such a big impact. Like, sadly to say, one of our alumni at our high school was found that he had committed suicide on one of our baseball fields while school was in session. And they basically just told us to not go out there, and they didn't like they didn't cancel school for the day, and we went on with our school day that whole time, even though we knew
Like it
that
didn't even
someone
happen.
exactly like it didn't even happen. So it's not talked about that much, especially in the school that I went to. But I also didn't experience a lot of people actually committing suicide. More of the fact of attempting. Like, I knew a couple people that would try to attempt in the school bathrooms.
Which is its own problem. You don't have to actually commit suicide for the attempt is really the big issue because it indicates a level of mental health that is inadequate for a healthy individual. I would agree with you too. From going to a different high school with you, we did also have someone try to attempt a few times on campus, and it was the exact same thing. The school locked it down, made it a dark zone, and then didn't address the issue afterwards. The community addressed the issue better than the actual school did, where the attempt did happen. So I think I agree with you. Lack of outreach from the school.
Which it's sad to hear that our schools aren't actually helping the issue, and they're just trying to cover it up.
Yeah.
Which I'm not sure if it's the same for all high schools or all schools all around, but like in the area that we lived in, I feel like it's a bigger issue than the people actually led it on to be.
Yeah. I think with, what do we have, 3 separate school experiences between us in terms of high school? I'd have to agree with you from both the high schools I went to. It was a very common thing. Well, thank you for listening to today's episode of Shut Up and Listen, hosted by yours truly, Payne Smith, with co-host Amber Evans. Thank you for listening, and please think about what you've listened to today. And if you can, advocate in your local community to address this issue. Thank you. I said, Mom, have you heard the word? I don't know how to say. Another one did the dirt. I guess he's just gone forever from the world. Forever from the world. Tears in my eyes, weighing me down. I wrote this song to help me drown all the hard times. I feel all alone, sad times in this town. My mother said, son, I know it's hard to see when things are so bleak. Please listen to me. It's the way of the world. It isn't right or wrong. Even your friends might try. Just remember they belong. The next week at school, it was a sense of shame. Everyone around me was suppressing their pain. I couldn't understand. It's like there's a law. You can never say her name. I walked through the doors, and there I saw her hanging up above. To the floor I fell. I couldn't believe the things I'd seen. So I called my mom. My mother said, son, I know it's hard to see when things are so bleak. So please listen to me. It's the way of the world. It isn't right or wrong.
I face day to day. No one seems to comprehend. The smell of whiskey in my face. I turned the water on. I've chosen my final place. To end it all, fucking at no law. I need it all on my own. Mother said, son, I know it's hard to see when things are so bleak. Please listen to me. It's the way of the world. Is it right or wrong? Your friend is my child. And mine and they belong. I said, Mom, have you heard the word? I don't know how to say. Another one bit the dirt.